the greatest first-year manager runs. And this conversation spurred because of the most recent UEFA Women's Champions League final with two head coaches that were in their first year. For Barcelona, it was Pere Romeu in his first full year with the club. He took over in June after Jonas Eidevall left Barcelona and came to Washington Spirit. He went on to help Barcelona go 28-0-2, 84 points, 128 goals, and they made it to a Champions League final. And then you look at the other side, Renée Slegers, who took Arsenal from January to May, just 5 months as a full-time head coach, second in the WSL league standings and stopping Barcelona from three-peating in the Champions League. And Arsenal becomes the champions of Europe. So it started this big debate. Who, Christine, which manager has had the greatest first-year run?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are a lot of names, but they're also a select few, right? These are the elites of the elites. And I think that we were fortunate to see such an explosive Champions League final out of first year managers. And granted, they both came into teams that were in definitely different states of order for sure, right? Like you had Pere Romeu come into this Barcelona side with Jonah Heraldez already having established dominance, with Jonah Heraldez in 2021-22 season coming in and winning the domestic treble, but not just winning the domestic treble. They won all 30 Liga FA matches, 90 perfect points, 159 goals, 11 conceded all season. So when you come into a team, and that's not to say anything negative about Pere, but that's an insane stacked roster to come into. It's almost like if you can't do it, it's more of a scathing indictment on you than otherwise. Whereas you look at Renée Slegers, who came in on the back of a team that had been trying to reestablish themselves, had made runs into the Champions League, hadn't won since 2007. And for her to come in as an interim in October, very early in the season, get fully appointed in January, absolutely see an instant impact on that squad, how they're playing more freely. And then to segue that into a Champions League win, your first season as manager is absolutely insane. Um, I think that also in this conversation, we have to acknowledge that, and this isn't a knock on Emma Hayes in any way, shape, or form, but I would say, chat, she's one of the world's great football managers, period. And you can tell me whether you agree or not, but her first season in 2012 with Chelsea, she came up trophyless. So when you look at the trajectory of the way that these managers who become what we now know from their body of work into great managers versus those who come out hammering and become these sort of specialists, I think there's an insane juxtaposition. I'd say too with Arsenal, in their climb forward, I'd put Joe Montemurro into this conversation. Big Joe, who we've seen more broadly around women's football world. He They won the Conti Cup with him in 2018, his first season with Arsenal, but they finished third in WSL. I wouldn't say that that's a blight, but then he goes on to Juve in Serie A Femminile 2021, 2023, or 2022, and he wins the domestic treble with them. So when you start to see these patterns of what they can do early on in their careers versus what they end up doing in the long run, you enter the conversation. Sonia Bompastor.
But Emma Hayes is on the other side of that because you just said in her first year with Chelsea, she didn't win anything, but then
Yep.
she jumps from the club level to the international level, going with the US women's national team and having the best 2024 that a manager could hope for, right? She came in and had 4 warm-up games before the team left for Paris. 4 matches.
Mhm.
4. Then she goes and wins gold. The first time for the US since 2012. She was not handed a roster and a system and a team that was set up to win gold. She had to do that herself. She went 10 games undefeated in 2024. From the time she took over to well after to winning gold. And then she finished completely undefeated, 13 wins and 2 draws. To me, that is the epitome of a coach in their first year.
Well, that's the point in it. Like the 2 questions you need to ask yourself are, what was the state of the club before they arrived? Was it a mess? Did they already have good players? And then how much was this coach responsible for recruiting these players or bringing the players in, or were they already handed a really solid roster that it could slide right into, right? So like, for example, Eidevall, he came into San Diego, half of those players he chose, half he didn't, because he knew some players that he wanted to pull in once he took the job. But also, how early did they get the job? How much time did they have to recruit players to come to the club that they're going to, that they identify as their style of play?
And I love that you brought that up, Lisa, with Emma specifically, and that I kind of baited you a little bit. I was like, come on out.
Yeah.
Think about how hard that is at the national team level to do that more immediately with less time and less capacity to shape a culture versus club day in, day out, seeing those same faces.
Absolutely. But I would argue that now Hayes has a harder job because she's trying to rebuild the entire structure of US soccer from like youth all the way up to the senior national team, right? She has single-handedly said, I am going to rework what it means to be on a U23, what it means to get a senior national team call up, to not make it this super exclusive, elusive club that if you're playing well, it'll translate to a call up or at least getting into camp to see what you're made of. I think that is a bigger, more daunting task than just, okay, we have 10 games until the gold medal match. It is day by day because there's only so many things you can work on in those moments. Now
Yes,
it's like,
but you're
okay,
also plucking from the US, which has a plethora of amazing players. Like, imagine if a coach went to coach for, say, Jamaica or something that isn't as established with quality players. The league isn't as established there.
FA
That's
isn't
harder
cooperative.
to
Yeah.
develop the players.
so if we think about how a team does based on what the club, the roster looks like prior to a coach getting there, that would essentially take Barcelona off the table because for the third time, Barcelona has promoted an assistant coach to their head coaching role. And that success of coaching and team stems back to 2019. And the roster really hasn't changed that much,
Mhm.
maybe one or two players year in and year out. What about Arsenal though for this year? How much did their roster change from last year into this year?
Not much at all. You got the influx of the Americans like Foxy. There were some adjustments, obviously, but like they didn't make very many moves, which was very
And that's
conservative
my
of
point
them.
for you, Christine.
Renee had to do what she could with literally what she had in a limited amount of time. So to be able to be that transformative for a manager working with the same tools as your predecessor and be able to turn that into a Champions League win after over a decade of trying to get back to that state of glory for the club is mind-boggling.
Is it now that we're seeing coaches get these chances to do it? Is football changing? McCall, I mean, why does it feel like this is happening so frequently now?
Well, in the case of Arsenal specifically, there was a lot of talk that Eidevall was kind of losing the locker room and the players weren't believing him anymore. So in that case, you have two decisions to make. You either get rid of the coach or you flip the roster over. So the roster was still the same. They have familiarity playing with each other. They kind of already had an ideology and style of play, whether it was from Eidevall or not. But all those players had connections already, and then they felt refreshed when the new coach got appointed, and they're like, okay, we asked the club to maybe possibly make a change in this area. They did. Now it's our job and our turn to do it on the field. And they rose together and really got some solid performances, and that gave them a great season.
Okay, so if we're talking about the best managers in their debut year at a team, where do these coaches fall? Like, what is the order that you're going with? Where does Sonia Bompastor, who's in her first year at
Yeah,
Chelsea and just won the domestic treble, where does
yeah.
she fall in all of this,
And
Christine?
she won her first full season with Lyon, she won the double. So, like, she's now, like, a repeat
She's proven.
offender.
She's
Like,
proven. She's done it in two
she's
different leagues
bullet
in two different countries, top teams. It's coaching. It's coaching. It's not the roster she was handed. It's both.
But McCall, Chelsea crashed out of Champions League. That's their goal. They've won the domestic treble. They've won the WSL for the 6th consecutive year. It is Champions League that Chelsea wants, and they didn't get there. They didn't even get to a semifinal.
And I'm sure that's disappointing for them, but that doesn't change Sonia's win record.
No, not at all. I feel like also Sonia is the first player to manager pipeline for Lyon. She's the first woman to ever coach Lyon. I think she's got a few other like gold stars on her belt there. Um, she took over from Jean-Luc Vasseur after he left, and Lyon at that point weren't in the greatest state to begin with. So like she did transform them into again this like legacy club, which begs the question now, like Barcelona having lost the Champions League this season, Lyon having the most Champions League titles. I think my expectation was if Barcelona were able to do this, like, does that mean that they're moving into that sort of dynastic role within women's football of usurping Lyon? And now we have Arsenal who gummed up the works here for them in essence. And what does that indicate for Arsenal now? Like, can Renée Slegers now having a full preseason, it's comical to say that, like a full
Yeah.
preseason and time with the team, statistically more difficult to replicate season over season, no matter what anybody says. What does the future look like for Arsenal women now?
If they don't make it to, let's say, the semifinal of the Champions League next year, is that a failure for Arsenal?
I feel like if they were to prioritize winning WSL again, and that if they flip it, I think there's some forgiveness in that because
So you think
trying
something
to
has to give always, but then you see Chelsea win a treble.
right, but Chelsea are also incredibly deep, and that depth is not something that Arsenal
But
has.
so is Arsenal. I mean, Jenna Neiswager isn't even playing.
Yeah, but
So
Jenna Neiswanger isn't good enough to play on that team in the
you
roles that they
really
need
don't
her
think
to.
so? Mm.
No. I think that they tried her a little bit more in the midfield, and I think she could be good on that flank, but then you also have like Mariona Caldente
Well,
who
that's
slots
filling
in
the
there.
depth. That's what we're talking
Yeah,
about, right? So I think they have
yeah.
it. I think they have what it takes.
I don't I think that their the depth that they do have is a further departure from their A team right now is what I'll say. Like their defense, like I wouldn't trade them for the world. Like that back line is integral to their success and swapping them around. I'm like, okay, fine. Like Wubin Moy, yeah, like you can get her in there, but like there's deviations enough that I'd be a little bit more worried.
Let's do this. Let's take Arsenal, put them in the NWSL. How would they do?
Oh, I think they well, no, I think they put up a pretty damn good fight. Like I think they'd be well, like do well in NWSL.
What's well to you?
Granted,
Top
like
three?
yeah, but like I think that it's hard to place them contextually because style-wise and also with the level of competition that's in NWSL and how it's undeniably the most competitive league in world football for women. Like no question. Like I will die on that hill. Um I think that it would it would illuminate whether they have a capacity to weather a storm like that to get back into playoffs. You know what I mean? Because we always see that dip in teams where, there's rock solid, then whoop, what happened? And then they come hammering back. But I think that that's just a feature of NWSL.
And perhaps if Arsenal were in the NWSL, they get playoffs, which
Yeah.
you obviously don't get in Europe. Would that help or hurt them at the end of the season to know, okay, you didn't finish first, didn't even finish
Yeah.
second, right? You can finish top 8
But that's kind of like
and
our mini
still win.
Champions League, right?
Exactly.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like the conversation is different because obviously there's the Conti Cup, there's multiple competitions in Europe that they can be also trying to win. I feel like NWSL is starting to get there where they're integrating. We have like summer cups and we have whatever and things like that. Where the
That we
emphasis
don't get
isn't too
trophies for.
heavy. What's that?
That we don't get trophies for.
Yeah, well, but yeah, there's things like that that the competition is getting more diversified, and I feel like the burden right now still isn't on NWSL to have to win secondary, tertiary trophies. I think that eventually that'll change, but right now I feel like there's far more emphasis in Europe on like, well, what else did you win? Like, oh, you
Yeah.
just won the league. And yeah, for those leagues, some of them there's less parity. Like in France, like you're gonna see those chunks at the top and bottom of the table, and then the middle is just kind of like no man's land.
I mean, you could even say that about the WSL. Chelsea is
Yeah.
how many points ahead of Arsenal?
I
So
don't think we celebrate the Shield enough. To me, that is the most phenomenal thing you can achieve in a season. You are consistently, over a long period of time, the best team. It's amazing.
Yeah. You know what? And to this conversation, I'll say, I know it's comparing apples to oranges. Seb Hines, Orlando Pride, first season. They won the league. They won the Shield. They hit multiple league records.
that
Like,
wasn't his first season.
oh wait, second season?
Yeah, that wasn't his first
Oh,
season.
damn
Just
it.
I
sit
like
there
his
for a long time too, but yeah.
Yeah. That wasn't his first season. But you could say that about Adrian or Jonah Heraldes
Hold on. Yeah,
making it to a final in his first
yeah.
year with
Or Juan
Washington
Carlos
Spirit.
Amaros.
Not even having a whole year. He came in June, everyone. I think that's pretty impressive to do that with a team that is riddled with injuries as well. That's
Yeah.
depth for Washington Spirit.
You have to really have a lot of faith too in Adrian Gonzalez to send him over to be like, you're deputized. Go.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the Barcelona tree that has been
Yeah.
built with branch after branch following the same procedure and regimen and coaching and understanding the system that allows that to happen, which also allows Barcelona to have a rotation of different coaches over the last 5 years and still win 3 Champions Leagues and make it to another final. So there's a lot to be said with it. But to kind of put a bow on this conversation, Christine, I'm going to throw this back to you.
Mhm.
Which manager had the best debutante season? You have to name one.
Oh, man. I think uh, I think I still have to go Jonah Heraldes just because of like the
In Washington
perfect first season he had. No, no, no.
with Barcelona.
For Barcelona. Yeah.
Okay.
Like they went invisible. They won everything. Like it was a perfect season.
That's a pretty good one. I'm going to go Emma Hayes, guys. That 2024 for her was just, to me, that is insane. That is incredible to win
Yeah.
gold in 10 matches with a new
Yeah.
team.
To win everything. And then I'd go second
Ins-
right now, I'd say it would be Renee for me. Like, because how the hell do you do that? You don't just like pop off and win Champions League out of nowhere.
So 2 of the 3 that we just named are women, too. Pretty cool. More women in coaching positions.